Fake news is basically false information shared in the media, mainly on social networks such as Facebook and WhatsApp, although it is also disseminated by other means, such as internet sites. A fake news is 70% more likely to be shared than a real one. This happens because it is new. People tend to share more unusual and unprecedented news. Usually creators use absurd and flashy headlines to attract people to this type of website, to make money from advertising. Another reason for creating fake news is the dissemination of an ideal or thought, which can be used to ruin a person's career, for bullying, or even to get votes in an election period. There are specific groups working on spreading these rumors, but they are difficult to find since they operate in the so-called deep web. To carry out this dissemination, a website is created where a robot created by the programmers of these groups is responsible for publishing its link on the networks. The more the subject is mentioned, the more the robot acts, getting to trigger information every 2 seconds.
By reaching a large number of people in a short period of time, social networks such as Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and WhatsApp are sources of dissemination of fake news. On these digital platforms, it's possible to make any type of publication. Your creativity is the limit. In order to have more likes and followers, several users start publishing false information. These posts that typically had flashy sentences are quickly shared and uploaded to other social networks, making false news to spread much faster. Another technique used is the clickbait, sentences that captures the reader's attention but sometimes are fake, attract visitors from a platform to a video, publication, and etc. Usually clickbait is used to somehow favor the creator, giving him views or shares. Knowing this is very important to check the content you read in the social networks, so as not to contribute by spreading false information that can affect a lot of people.
Fake news can be extremely harmful when it comes to its effects in others' lives, and it can change the path of loads of events such as the elections. If a person is slandered with false information about them, their future could have as consequence a negative impact, considering that these cases of fake news disseminate incredibly humiliating and or poorly checked characteristics and information about them. Since we live in a society that theoretically guarantees freedom of speech and democracy, it is at least inconvenient or even damaging to the maintenance of the structures created by a constitution in a country ruled in these circumstances. It can also cause financial injury. In order to avoid these kind of consequences, arises this need to rethink about the influences of fake news.
But how could we combat the fake news and the misinformation? Well, a lot of countries have been taking actions against the fake news with a diversity of ways, as well as laws and public policies that punish the people responsible by fines and even arrests. Also, private regulation using, for example, algorithms to detect this false information or recommend sources considered more truthful. But what seems to be more effective is the media literacy campaign, which develops the ability to identify different types of media and understand the message they are sending. So it would be possible to think critically and create media responsibility. One of its elements is the fact-checking, a way to verify the information and show how true that actually is. When you're fact-checking, it's important to consider the source, investigate it, and know its reputation, if it's truthful and non-partisan. Examine the context. What is the real objective of it, if it's a joke, opinion, and base it on what fact. Verify the supporting sites. Look out for questionable quotes and photos, and of course check with other sources and instruments as reputable fact-checking websites like Agência Lupa, Fato ou Fake, Agência Pública e Farsas, and FakeCheck.
Could fake news be the same of restrict the right to freedom of expression? Well, the notion of law involves limits. Not everything is allowed, and if not so, life in society would be impossible. Freedom of expression is undoubtedly one of the most sacred and fundamental rights. It must be respected for sure. But in the regulation of the conduct of people in society and in definition of the limits that separate what is prohibited from what is allowed, the legislative power can choose to create rules that prevent or remove injury to these legal assets depending on the situation in question. In this way, it is not possible to define the freedom of expression attitudes that result in hate speech and crimes. Therefore, this must be vehemently fought and punished by the judiciary.
Fake news can affect directly all types of choices, including the election for president. A major example is the election of President Trump in the USA. An article in BuzzFeed News says that 3 months before the election, the number of fake news on Facebook was bigger than the number of real news. This fact is very worrying because a lot of people believe in this fake news, and even if they don't vote, they take these statements as true and share them, and get more people fooled by those fake news. One fake news that was very famous with almost 1 million shares is that the Pope was endorsing Trump. Now imagine how this affects the image of Trump in a country that his population is majority Catholic. Most of the people that was in doubt, even some that would vote Hillary, changed their minds and started to support Trump. Another fake news that became very famous was that Hillary has sold weapons for Ísis. This fake news was shared for almost 800,000 users and ruined her image for good. Even that is no proof that this was a decisive factor in the win of Trump. Several political scientists believe that those fake news had a very important role.
Fake news also affected the Brazilian presidential elections. The circulation of fake news during the elections period by WhatsApp in most of the cases was a determining factor for the victory of Jair Bolsonaro. The news shared by Bolsonaro's electors were directed mainly to the PT candidate, Fernando Haddad, to damage his image before voters. We can talk about 2 fake news to exemplify the nature of those elections. First of all, the kit game. It was said by Bolsonaro that it was a project made by Haddad in the period he was the São Paulo's mayor to teach promiscuity and gender ideology to children. Actually, it was a project named School Without Homophobia that granted materials for the kids to learn about equality and respect with other genders and sexual orientations. The second fake news is about the man who stabbed Bolsonaro. It was said that Adélio Bispo de Oliveira, the Bolsonaro's aggressor, was affiliated to PT, with photos edited to put the men's faces in manifestations with Lula. Later, it was proved that this was a fake and were found no register of the man in the PT-based documents.